Hi, let's just get right to it today, shall we? Wire. I'm going to continue my Wire discussions here. I'm just on a Wire kick this week. It feels right. I'm in serious Wire mode right now. I pretty much always am. I can't think of a time in the last 35 years of my life where I haven't been in Wire mode. Ever since I heard these guys, it's been a long fascination with this group. Love these guys. I'm going to talk about this. A bell is a cup unless it is struck. This is one of their albums that I've had, or until it is struck. Pardon me. I've mentioned in past videos, I don't pay a lot of attention to album titles and song titles. It's just about the music. I listen very closely to the music and don't pay so much attention to what things are called. It's just the sound that matters to me. This is a maybe you Wire fans, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. This is possibly one of their more difficult albums, maybe their most difficult albums. I don't know. Is it? For me, it is. But that's exactly why I love Wire. Their albums absolutely require multiple listens over the years. Things can grow on you. You might love something Wire did right off the bat and then like it less and then come back to it, or you just might not like something initially as much and then rediscover it years later. This is one of those records. I've always liked this record, but it's been challenging for me to get into this one. I think I know why now. It's taken me many years to realize why I feel that way about this record. And a lot of it is my fault, just like any album that ever comes out. If we don't like something, it's usually because of us. It's not because of the music. This is the one Wire album that's taken me a while to get into. This came out in 1988, I think. Please, I get these years wrong. 1988. Yes. This came out right before It's Beginning to and Back Again. I'm pretty sure about that chronology. Please forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure this came out prior to It's Beginning to and Back Again. Almost positive. Like, yeah, that came out in 1989, I think. Yes, 1989. Sorry, I'm running through my dates here in my mind. The interesting thing about Wire too, this is a bit of a side note, but they like to take their songs and then redo them later. And so sometimes I get those timings mixed up. I'm like, wait a minute, that song came out there, but that was an old Wire song and they re-recorded it. They do that a lot. They're not interested in covering other people. They're interested in covering themselves. And this album actually has an example of that. Boiling Boy. They ended up doing that on, oh man, I can't remember the name. It's 1020 something. It just came out in the last decade. Excellent record where they were re-examining their own stuff. God, what was the name of that? I think 1020 is in there somewhere. Sorry, I can't remember. I can't remember the name of it. Oh, it's going to drive me nuts until I can think about it. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. I think it's just 1020, right? 1020? Maybe it's just that simple. I feel like there's another word in there, but they put out an album called 1020 3 or 4 years ago, and it had a re-recording of Boiling Boy. I think the re-recording that came out on the 1020 album is better than this. This is still excellent, but the version they just did a few years back, man, it's so good. I mean, that's just proof positive as to why these guys are such a powerful group. You know what I mean? They have it. Sorry, my computer's flashing. If you see lights here, actually, let me change it. There we go. I'll just leave it on that one. My computer's, I have some stuff open on my screen right here, and it's flashing different things. I apologize if that is distracting. Anyway, yeah, sometimes it's hard for me to remember the release dates and times because they're always kind of redoing their own stuff. It's interesting. One of the many fascinating things about Wire, I think. But this has been a tough for me to get into. I think because production wise, it has that 80s drum sound, the very processed drums that were prevalent in the 80s. It was hard for me to get into those even then. And it still is to some degree even now. But Wire were always changing, as I've mentioned in other Wire videos, what part of the allure of this band is their music needs a lot of unpacking. You know what I mean? Lots of unstitching is required when you listen to a Wire album. It's never just as simple as listening to it and then getting what you need to get out of it. There's always more to it. And sometimes it takes years, at least in my case, it takes years to really have that point they were trying to get out hammered home. Here are the lyrics, which is always a plus when you have a Wire album because they sing a lot of the stuff they sing about is you can't really get your mind wrapped around it right away. It takes multiple listens, and even then, sometimes their lyrics are like, "What?" They're very very much into wordplay. Wire. This is the U.S. edition, by the way. This is on Enigma Records. This was like the generic inner sleeve Enigma had. It's like a mail order sheet, but it acted as an inner sleeve as well. Most of Enigma's records had this label. It's like that on both sides of the label. I'm not going to show both. You get the gist. Nice pressing. Physically, nothing wrong with this pressing. I did look this up on Apple Music recently. It has the original CD track listing, which is these 10 tracks, and then it compiles tracks from this, Kidney Bingos. The Kidney Bingos single. I still have my hype sticker on there. It got torn up a little bit over the years, as you can see. But all of these B-sides you see here are on the digital version, so you do get those. So if you have Apple Music or anything like that, you're going to get these extra tracks. You got a couple of live songs here, Drill, one of their classics. It's hard to fuck that song up. Obviously, there are a lot of versions of Drill. I mean, they have a whole album of Drill. The album they put out after Manscape, right? After Manscape and before the first letter, I think. It's lumped in there. It came out in 1990, 91, something like that. It's a whole album, basically, of Drill versions. And Drill was a single that came out during the Ideal Copy, and then there's a live version of it that came out on this. This came out in 1988, I think, same year. Oh, 87, okay. Or wait. Live tracks were recorded in 87. This record was released in 88. Okay, that makes sense. It seems like I've had it for that long. The other single that came from this album, and I'll talk more about the music in a minute, Silk Skin Paws. This is one of their most popular tracks. You can see why, too. It's a well-written, softer, pop-style song for Wire, at least. There are the track listings. I did not see these on the digital version. So if you want these versions or these tracks, remixes and such, you might need to seek this one out. I didn't see these readily available. And I like this more than Kidney Bingos, personally. In terms of the versions and the remixes here. I like this one slightly better. You can't go wrong with whenever you see this on a record sleeve, you can't go wrong. You're in for a treat, no matter what. I just prefer this one to Kidney Bingos. So back to the album here. Yeah, this has been a difficult entryway for me. Maybe their most difficult album for me to break into. Like I mentioned before, the sound has that slightly dated, processed 80s feel to it. But Wired, they did that on purpose. One of the very many exciting things about this band is they're always changing things up in their approaches and their states of mind. And that's what this is. And they had broken up as a band for a while. When they got to The Ideal Copy, I always thought The Ideal Copy, the record before this, that was kind of them getting their bearings again as a band. They had all split off. Like Helen Newman was doing his thing, and Gilbert was doing his thing, and Lewis was doing his thing, all doing different things. And then they came together on The Ideal Copy, and I think they were sort of grasping with the idea of recording as a band again together. And once they knew they could do that, they did this. So it's still kind of the sound of a band figuring out how to play together again, but in a completely new and fresh way. Because if you know the early Wire stuff, we all know what that sounds like. Those of you who only know Wire from the first 3 albums, by the way, you're doing yourself a big disservice by not listening to their entire catalog. You're missing the bigger picture, I think. Those 3 first records, they all have a similar sound, and they're brilliant. Don't get me wrong. They are absolutely brilliant. I'm not... let me check this mic. Make sure this is still on. It is. Okay. I'm not trying to talk ill of those first 3 records. I love them just like most people do. But the vast majority of Wire fans are probably old school fans, and they just love those first 3 albums. You're really doing yourself a disservice. The Wire has an arc. To fully have the Wire experience, you've got to hear all the albums. You're cutting yourself off from a huge portion of their best work. I would make arguments that their best albums have come out in the last 20 years. Chairs Missing is their one early album that I absolutely love, arguably my favorite. But they do have a couple of albums in the past 20 years, one just in the last 5 years, that I think there's an argument to be made that they are their best. So if you're a Wire fan of the first 3 albums, take some time to explore the rest of their catalog. And this, of course. In contrast to their first 3 records, this is, I mean, completely different. There's nothing even remotely similar. That's why this is great. This is a band that's stretching themselves, that's taking themselves out of their comfort zones to make something new and fresh and succeeding. And I think that's a lot of the reason why I haven't really ever been able to warm up to this album until recent years, is because it was so different. It took me a while to figure all that out. But this is music that needs to be unpacked. Wire doesn't necessarily make music that you get right away. It creeps up on you. If there was ever a band that creeps up on you and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I get it now, it's Wire. A lot of this music I've always felt is just over my head. That's why I don't get it. Like, these guys are too smart. Really smart. Excellent music. Another thing that I love about Wire is this album in particular. This is a pretty angry album. I won't get into every little lyric, but I can't open this gatefold here. But if you were to read some of these lyrics, I mean, Wire's always made music that's pretty angry lyrically, but it's pretty angry on this album. It's angry with society and the world and humanity. That kind of anger. Not like, oh, my girlfriend left me and I'm sad now. Not that kind of shit. The anger that can only be drummed up if you're sensitive and you pay attention to the world around you, which I know we all are. This is great music for that. But what I love about Wire and music in general, there are bands that do this in a perfect way, just beautifully. They have a really angry message. It's just hostile and pissed off. But then the music is super jangly. and happy. I love that. Another band that did that with absolute perfection and precision were the Smiths. You had these lovely Johnny Marr melodies and guitar loops and guitar twangs, and then you had Morrissey just seething underneath it, just bitching and moaning and hating on the world. And then this happy, jangly pop music in the back. I mean, I love that. That dichotomy, that juxtaposition of moods is beautiful when you can pull it off. It's tough, but you can do it. Another group that does this very well are the Pet Shop Boys. They have some of the most shiny, poppy music you can think of, but lyrically, it can be just completely cynical and sarcastic and horrible. Those of you who think the Pet Shop Boys are just some happy, shiny pop band, you're not listening. You should try them out if you like bands like this, I think. That lyrical and musical juxtaposition, there's nothing better. I love that when bands are able to pull it off, you know. But yeah, this is the sound of a band kind of coming together and figuring out if they can continue to work with each other. Their different styles and states of mind are all kind of butting heads with each other, you know. And one of the reasons I really love Wire too is that they're a pop band in the sense that pop music is something that needs to be marketed and sold. All music in that, when you think of it that way, all music is pop music. So Wire understands that. Like, they have the talent to write catchy melodies and pop tunes, but their music is too complicated and dense for pop music. So that's why I understand these guys. They're always on the periphery of music. They seem to understand what they need to do to be popular, but they're not interested so much in having that kind of message. So it's complicated music. You know, the pop music is created by the media for the media. It's not designed for music to impart information to the listeners. But Wire want to do that. So that's where their true charm comes in a lot of ways, I think. They are a pop band in that very base level way. But their music's way too complicated for that. And I think that's why I've always had a hard time getting into this album and some of the other Wire albums. But once you make that, or once I made that realization, it was like, right, I get it. I get this now. This is an excellent record. Awesome stuff. You can hear it. Like, they'll throw a jangly, beautifully written pop song at you with an awesome melody, and then there'll be three or four tracks of just angry dirge, you know. But then another song comes that's radio friendly, and then the rest of the album is just more angry, experimental stuff. Wire's so good at that. They've just perfected it. And I think that was starting to mold right here, that whole vision, that whole approach to the pop world that they didn't really like in the first place, but they knew they had to depend on to sell records. It's a necessary evil. Wire understands that. And that's why this album is interesting and deserves your attention. So if you haven't listened to this recently and you're a Wire fan, do it. Listen to this. You should. And if you're hung up on Pink Flag and Chairs Missing and 154, listen to this. And listen to all Wire albums. Move on past the first three. You are really missing out on a lot of brilliant shit. And this is no different. It's just I mentioned this in another Wire video last week. There was no peak for these guys. Never. These guys have never ceased to be awesome. You want a band that has frightening consistency, just a straight line of consistency. Look no further than Wire. These guys just don't operate on any other speed. It's not possible for them. They're not interested in doing it, and they're way too intelligent to do it. Such a great record. And I'm so glad that I've given this time, because it was well over my head when I first heard it. But now, I love it. All right, until next time, thank you and have a good day. Bye.